Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SANS webcast. What's new in SEC401, Security Essentials Bootcamp style? My name is Carol Auth of SANS, and I will be moderating today's webcast. Today's featured speaker is Brian Simon, SANS instructor. If during the webcast you have any questions for our presenter, please enter them into the questions window at any time. Please note that this webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to Brian.
Thank you for the introduction, Carol. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone from around the world who is attending this presentation. My name is Brian Simon. I'm a principal instructor with the SANS Institute, and I am the lead author for SEC401. I'd like to welcome you all to this presentation, this webcast. This webcast was put together to help make everyone aware of a few things regarding SEC401. First and foremost, just like any other SANS class, our content is always kept up to date, is current, and is always relevant. We want to make sure that we're always able to help everyone fulfill the SANS promise. The SANS promise being that whatever is learned in the classroom is immediately applicable upon return to work once you finish the class. But above and beyond simply going through the idea of what is new when it comes to SEC401, and as we'll see, there are extensive modifications and changes that have been made, we also wanted to cover in this presentation some of the misconceptions that are out there regarding who should or should not attend 401. With that being said, in this webcast, we will then go through not only the key changes, but also give an overview of exactly what is covered in 401 and who is the target audience for such a class. With that, let's go ahead and begin. And of course, please feel free to type questions into the chat window, and we will have a Q&A at the end of the presentation. With that, let's go ahead and jump right into our introduction to the course content itself. SEC401 is an interesting course in the way that it's been structured. SEC401 is designed to produce, by the end of the course, an all-round, very capable information security professional. In order to be well-versed and well-rounded in the information security industry, we cover as many topical areas in the information security realm as is possible. And in fact, we cover more than 30 different topical areas of information security. We start off with basics. Well, I shouldn't say basics, but we start off with the basic of our conversation, which is around defensible network architecture, understanding how the adversary leverages our environment against us. And we quickly progress through things such as protocols and packet analysis, digital forensics and incident response, identity and access management, and so much more. You might have noticed that as one of the topics listed is the idea of cloud. And I'll tell you that not only cloud or the other topics that are mentioned here, each of them could be their own 5 or 6 day class at SANS, and in fact, many of them are. The goal in 401 is to cover the breadth of what we need to know to make us well-rounded professionals, which means that we fly high and then we do a deep dive when necessary. Just having 30 topical areas, though, in and of itself would not necessarily be the best way to digest information. And so how 401 has been structured is the idea of a theme, where each day of the class has a specific theme. Day 1, for example, is our network security essentials. By thematically grouping the related concepts, we build the idea of a story or a framework as we move through the material. What also makes it relative and very interesting is that the first 4 days of our class are architected on understanding what it is that we need to do in the face of a modern adversary. The last 2 days of the class are focused on how we actually apply what we learned in the first 4 days. You see, when it came to 401 and its recent update, one of the things that I was incredibly focused on as the lead author was to ensure that we are discussing the modern adversary. Perhaps what always interests people who take 401, whether they are brand new to the field or already have perhaps years of experience, is that there's a lot of misunderstanding regarding who the adversary is. In some respects, we give far too much credit to the capability of the adversary. And don't get me wrong, they are very capable. But the problem is that we almost make them to the point of being mythological and that they are all powerful and there's nothing that we can do. Well, Brian, even if I could detect the adversary in the network, they're just encrypted. Statements such as that often get in the way of us actually being able to architect a defense that is winnable. For me, that was an important aspect of focusing on 401 to make sure that we understood in the first 4 days just exactly who the modern adversary is, just exactly how they operate. And in the face of that, perhaps the biggest concern that we want to address, how can it be that almost every single day we hear of yet a new compromise in the face of more security being available than ever before? Right now in the year 2020, we have more security that we could purchase than ever before, and yet it doesn't seem to make a difference. And if such a statement seems bold and perhaps controversial, maybe it is, but maybe it's not as controversial as one would think, because it seems to be we do hear of a brand new compromise almost every single day. And many of those organizations that are compromised, they make an attempt at security. In other words, what we're doing may not be working. And that's why we spend the first 4 days focused on the what we need to do in the face of a modern adversary. But by the end of the 4th day, people are itching to know, well, how do we actually apply those concepts? And I think that's what makes 401 unique, because in those final 2 days of class, we focus on how we apply the first 4 days of learnings to real-world application as applied to operating systems. Where on day 5, we focus on the Windows operating system, the #1 desktop enterprise operating system on the planet. And on day 6, we focus on things such as Linux and Unix. Perhaps what also makes, 401 so interesting is that it's written for the idea of managers and technical professionals. 401 is designed to be a class for everyone. And even if, as a manager, a person intended to never be hands-on keyboard, it is important to have a technical understanding of information security. Because, of course, their teams will report to them and provide information that needs to be understandable and digestible by that manager. But even saying that, there is a different way to look at that. One of the things that still is not taught today throughout many academic programs worldwide is the idea of soft skills, business style skills for those that are involved in technological roles. A big part of 401 is learning how to speak and to convey the information of risk, cybersecurity risk, to all of those that are involved in the organization. It's not a surprise to me that when I work with my other clients and other individuals, that they struggle in describing information security risks to their leadership. And oftentimes the biggest reason they have a hard time describing that risk is because they don't know how to describe the risk in a way that's understandable by their leadership. 401 is designed for all to make sure that we're covering all of those types of skills and content so that we know how to architect and speak to everyone and at the same time make an important difference from the cybersecurity of our organization. And that's just a very quick introduction to 401. But the way it's structured, I think, is really important to understand so that we can all see the benefit that would come from taking such a class. Just to kind of put a slide up, though, to show you a quick outline of the class, here we can see the different aspects of the theme that has been set up, where here you see on the slide each of the individual themes for each of the individual days. As mentioned, we first start out with network security essentials. We use this as a baseline day to make sure everyone is on the same level of understanding for the rest of the week to make sense. And even when people are network engineers and they take the class, they're often astonished to understand that when they were taught networking, they were taught it from a productivity perspective. They were not taught it from a security perspective. And of course, while that's always changing, it doesn't change quick enough. Even more important, above and beyond, we cover in that day how to detect and defend against the modern adversary. And all in all being said, why start with a network? Because it's the most important asset for us and for them being the adversary. An adversary has an Achilles heel. They have to be on your network to achieve their long-term success. At the very least, they require continuous access, maybe perhaps through the form of command and control. And if they're on our network, we can detect them. And the best way to detect is to know ourselves. If we know normal, then abnormal stands out. Everything that we learned in that first concept of network security essentials serves us well for the remainder of our discussion, because everything does come back to the network. And by the end of that first day, people feel very empowered, and they should, because I can tell you that by the end of that first book of content, you have the power, we have the power, a power that the adversary does not wish us to have, the ability to detect them. And once we detect, it's game over for the adversary, because that leads to incident response. With such an important foundation in play, it then leads to the next part of our discussion, which is defense in depth. Defense in depth is the most important aspect of overall information security, because defense in depth is the core foundation of security. In the defense in depth discussion, we discuss how to do it properly, because again, it's another one of those very misunderstood concepts in the industry. And defense in depth quickly leads to the first important aspect of defense in depth, which is access controls. Access control methodology applies to pretty much everything we do from the information security realm. And you can see that with even such a description, we build solidly upon our foundations. That leads to the discussions of identity and access management. That leads to discussions of critical security controls, and so on and so forth. Once we have that foundation of defense in depth in play, it leads to a discussion on vulnerability management and incident response. We spend quite a bit of time discussing the notion that an adversary will eventually succeed in breaking in to one's organization. And it's on day 3 or in the third book of content that we learn not only to how to be proactive and to discover the weaknesses that allow an adversary to manifest, but even more importantly, how to address and to deal with them once they manifest. The quicker we detect, the quicker we respond, the less damage overall that is incurred. Our final book of content in those first important 4 days of how, or pardon me, 4 days of what we need to do, is the idea of data security technologies. In that day, we spend more than half of it focused on cryptographic concepts. Cryptography gives us many related security concepts, some of the most important ones we engage in, and yet again, it's misunderstood. Sadly, above and beyond, not only is cryptography misunderstood from its benefits and how they're achieved, quite often we're not the ones who deploy those controls. So we learn not only how to make cryptographic concepts make sense, we learn how to take advantage of all the goals that come from cryptography, whether that's confidentiality, integrity, authentication, or some combination of the above. We learn how to apply those concepts and perhaps in some respects, even most importantly, how to convey them to the individuals who deploy the controls. With all that being said, that leads then to the end of our first 4 days of content, which is again focused on the what we need to do. On day 5, we pivot into how we do what we did in the first 4 days in the aspects of the Microsoft Windows operating system. And then finally, last and definitely not least, we conclude by taking that same aspect as to how we apply all of that to Linux, Mac OS, and smartphones from their security perspective. I think it becomes clear, and I hope it's clear at this point, what we achieve in those days of class, in the overall course itself, and how important it was that we lined up thematically with what we did. Now, again, I know that some of you might already be familiar with 401. Maybe you attending the webcast to hear specifically what's new, and we are getting to that. But I wanted to make sure that anyone who listens to this webcast also understands why 401 is an important class, an important foundational class that really sets them up for success, whether they continue with additional training or not above and beyond. And in that perspective, that really leads us to perhaps the biggest misunderstanding with 401, the question related to who should take 401. If someone was to come up to me and ask me, well, Brian, who is the ideal individual for taking 401? My answer is quite simple. The answer is yes. No, I'm sorry, Brian. Who should take 401? Yes. Yes, they should. 401, while it is a foundational class, does not mean it is only for the new, the uninitiated, right? The initial level entrance into the information security realm. It's not just meant for people who are brand new to the field. 401 is for anyone of any level of experience. Yes, any level of experience. Whether you have no experience, 6 months of experience, or 6 years more of experience, 401 is still right for all. And we'll get into exactly why that is in just a moment. 401 is also for any level of technical ability. When you take a SANS class, when anyone takes a SANS class, they're going to be overwhelmed. There's going to be a lot of learning that happens, and that's the whole point. 401, just like every other SANS class, is designed to give you what you need to be successful in a very short period of time. It's the equivalent of drinking from a fire hose when you're thirsty. It's easy to become overwhelmed. But it is for any level of technical ability. There is no prerequisite for 401. You don't have to take any other class before 401. It's for anyone of any capability, whether or not you're in a technical role. Remember, it's also designed for managers. And above and beyond that, perhaps related, no IT background is required. I hear a lot of misconceptions in general in the industry, things that you have to be a programmer before you can work in security. As far as I'm concerned, all of those are myths and have no basis in reality. Is knowing how to program an asset? Sure. But is knowing how to program a requirement for being a security professional? Absolutely not. It is not a requirement in any way, shape, or form. Just as like there is no IT background required for 401. There are people who transition from specific job roles after years of experience already. I've even had astrophysicists in class that are transitioning from their current role into the information security realm. I say all of that to make sure that we understand that it really is for all. Now, sometimes people might think that sounds disingenuous in the idea that it sounds like it's a marketing tactic, but it's not. For me, my goal when it comes to anything educational wise is to make sure that everyone has the appropriate information, accurate information, and that it's as truthful as possible. When I tell you that 401 is for anyone, it's true. And I'll give you some examples of what I mean. Here's a comment from an individual, Christopher Nuri, who took the class just a little while ago. He's already been in the industry for many years. He's a senior industrial pen tester at Dragos, which is a company that focuses on industrial control systems and related security. And he states that it's an excellent course. He relearned security concepts and was introduced to new current material. He recommends the course for anyone at any stage of their cybersecurity career. Now, that comment is one that Christopher posted directly to LinkedIn without any request from anyone at SANS. He felt prudent to share the information because Christopher, like myself, and it's many of us who are listening to this and others in the industry, we care about giving back. One of the things I think is the most interesting is a takeaway from those who take the class. Even people with years of experience will often tell me afterwards, Brian, I didn't know I had gaps in my knowledge. I didn't realize that there was a concept that I had misunderstood. I always wondered how something worked, and now I have the missing piece of the puzzle. That is not uncommon. In fact, my journey has been interesting as well. I started out as a student and eventually worked my way in. I already had years of experience when I took 401 all the way back in 2006, and I came away with the same learning. No one person can know it all, and your experience is your experience. Your experience is related to the work you do. If you never come across a specific task from a specific aspect of information security, it would be new to you once you learn it. And that's why I say that 401 is for everyone, including those with experience. Because there's just no way, unless you've had decades in your career already, that you would cross all those individual bridges that we cover in 401. And of course, when it comes to writing the class, the related aspect of all of that is that it has to be applicable. The SANS promise, what you learn is immediately applicable upon your return to work, is equally true and was held to that account with this most recent update. 401 again is designed for defending against that modern adversary. And perhaps one of the most interesting aspects of all of that is that there is no room for theoretical. I do not discuss theoretical, either when I'm lecturing or in my courseware. Why discuss what might happen when we don't already address what does happen? And that's the applicability that we want to have here. And we see Thomas Wilson, another individual who took the class, who found the course content incredibly useful and directly applicable to their job. Where above and beyond, something we haven't mentioned yet is also the idea of our labs, where our labs help to reinforce and to apply the concepts to make them immediately reinforced as we learn throughout the class itself. So I think with all of that there, that helps us to understand who should take 401. And again, remember, the answer to that is simple. The answer is yes. Yes, we should. Thank you for all of those who are listening to this, wanting to get to the heart of the matter of this webcast. So what exactly has changed with this most recent update of 401? Well, first and foremost, 60% of our content is brand new or rewritten. We're always focusing on making sure that content is relevant and up to date. When people hear that 60% of the content is new or rewritten, they might assume that content had become stagnant over a period of time. And that's not the case here. It's not the case at all. 401 is always kept current, relevant, and up to date. But the reason we're having this webcast is because 60% of the content is new or rewritten. Our industry changes. The modern adversary changes. The definition of modern today will be different than the definition of modern yesterday. In order to stay abreast, in order to stay current, in order to be relevant, in order to make a difference against the adversary, you need the best information available. Myself, as well as the rest of the authorship team over the past 12 months, dedicated ourselves to doubling down and making sure that every aspect of everything we touch is immediately applicable. One of the other interesting things, though, that came to bubble and to manifest as we were going through the idea of rewriting or adding new content was to understand that, I guess, academic programs, educational programs, as people go through school, are becoming better at adding in cybersecurity to some degree into their learnings. And we found that what we wanted to do then, if people are coming in with a little bit more of a base of an understanding of cybersecurity, was to not still give all the information that's necessary to make an individual well-rounded and capable, but to make sure that that technical difficulty was at an appropriate level. It's sort of like exercising. As we start to become comfortable with our routine, it's important to stretch. And I don't mean stretching, that is important. I mean stretching beyond your comfort level. And so we took that into consideration with our 401 update as well. One topic, though, kind of gets a lot more attention, and the idea of how important it's truly become. And that idea would be cloud. Did I say cloud? I think I said cloud. One of the most important aspects of the 401 update was to take into consideration not how we can just make someone as capable as possible in a general sense, but how can we make them capable from both a cloud and an on-premise perspective. And that is a difficult aspect to do because on-prem and cloud are similar and yet different at the exact same time. We wrote a brand new cloud module, but more importantly than that, we have cloud distributed throughout the courseware. And if it's all right, I'm just going to hold off on that just for a little bit more. We'll have some examples of what I'm referring to there as we get towards the end of our presentation. And of course, people always love to do hands-on exercises. For our lab updates, we actually did quite a bit with this update as well. First and foremost, we made a move to our own Linux distribution. It's called Slingshot. And one of the reasons we did that was to give consistency throughout our courseware. More and more classes at SANS will move to the Slingshot Linux distribution, and that just makes it easier for our students, our attendees, to move from class to class. It also gives them consistency and better ability for troubleshooting and support. We added some exciting new labs, but perhaps the most interesting and most exciting update above and beyond when it comes to labs is the idea that we move to a full electronic workbook, an electronic wiki. For the wiki, it's built right into your Slingshot Linux distribution. And here's a very simple screenshot of what I'm getting at. We've taken all the labs and made them digital. You can easily go through the labs, repeat and review on your own. And we've even included the ability to do copy and paste. So as you get to typing longer command line syntax towards the ends of the week, we've given the option of copying and pasting right into the terminal window. This will help you to achieve success more quickly in the labs. It's easy to make typos towards the end of the week, but importantly, it's just an aspect of an overall feeling better as you achieve success throughout the program. Note how I said towards the end of the week, we allow you to copy and paste. We don't allow copy and paste in the first labs because we want people to be comfortable with command line. Command line is important today. It's always been important, but it's more important than ever before because that's an aspect of automation. And if we want to achieve success in the face of the modern adversary, we have to have automatable capability. But of course, it's above and beyond just having digital copies of the labs. We have information on the various tools that we use. We have cheat sheets. We have a lot of capabilities built in that goes above and beyond even what you do in class. That's because we care, and we know that your journey doesn't end at the end of class. And this is only the beginning. This wiki will continue to evolve with each and every update, but it's a big step forward to bringing consistency and exciting new aspects to the 401 class itself. It would behoove me, though, to mention perhaps one of the most and final aspects of the wiki that become important, and that would be the notion or the idea that the wiki also gives us flexibility. If we find there's a mistake in a printing of the manual, if we find something that's broken, we can update the lab on the fly in the electronic copy. And then a student can go and automatically update their wiki to get the latest content. And I should be clear, that doesn't mean that after class ends, you're always getting a new and updated wiki, but you are getting revisions and bug fixes relative to your current version of 401 that you took. And I think that's just an exceptional value add that allows us to be flexible in the classroom, to be as responsive as is necessary, but to also give us, the attendee confidence that they're getting up-to-date content as time moves on relative to their current release of the course. I think it's just one of the most exciting aspects that we've done above and beyond everything else, which I also find exciting. I think you can tell I get excited when it comes to 401, and I am passionate about the success of all of us in the industry above and beyond. As promised and as alluded to, the official slide on cloud. For our brand new cloud module, it received a complete overhaul. And above and beyond, more importantly than an individual concept of cloud or module, because of course cloud can be its own 5-day or 6-day conversation, we recognize that what would really be helpful is if we took the concepts of 401 in general and mixed cloud in where we could. In other words, as we discuss identity and access management, we actually discuss on-prem and cloud. When we discuss the notions or the ideas of access control methodology, we discuss on-prem and cloud. We've added cloud in throughout various other modules so that cloud is at the forefront at the same time as an on-premise discussion. Why such a focus on cloud? Well, cloud has always been important. It'll always be more important than the day prior, but a very interesting aspect for the challenging times we all face right now. In the midst of the past 7 months and what's been happening globally, many organizations made a very sudden push to cloud in order to continue operating as everyone started to work from home. This sudden push to cloud happened for organizations that were very hesitant to move to cloud in general, that were very resistant to the idea, that maybe might never have moved to cloud. And I don't like saying the word never, but it definitely was not on their radar. And maybe it wouldn't have happened for years, at least. Oh, but when everything suddenly came to a halt and the world shut down, many organizations made a move that they were uncomfortable with because it meant surviving or not surviving as an organization. And while that is incredibly beneficial and it's understandable why those decisions were made, the bigger impact will still be felt down the road as to what decisions were made as cloud was taken up. Above and beyond all of that, once an organization is in cloud, they're not going back because the benefits of cloud can be too much to ignore. And of course, cloud should not be ignored. The benefits are too great to ignore. This is why we wanted to make sure that if you're going to be a well-rounded individual, if you're going to be well-rounded and capable as a professional, you need to understand cloud as it applies now, as it applies tomorrow, perhaps, and as it applies overall from the idea of what we've done in the last 7 months as a response to a global emergency, a global situation. Then, of course, above and beyond that, because cloud will only become more and more and ever increasingly important, then any opportunity to expand upon cloud is at the forefront of all of our future updates. It really is about making sure people are as capable as is possible. But instead of telling you just how much we've done for cloud, let's give some examples. Here's an example of one of the slides of content that discusses the shared responsibility model for a cloud provider as it's applied to Amazon Web Services. And you can see here that we're very cognizant and very confident in the approach that we give to make sure that not only do we discuss exactly what cloud is, but again is how we tie it together in the realm of other parts of our discussion. Here's that example. When we're discussing the idea of managing our networks, when it comes to the idea of discussing access control methodology, we also discuss, as I alluded to, how we apply that concept to the cloud. And we can see here an example of how we would set up a management subnet, again, as applied to Amazon Web Services, where for the first time ever, because in some aspects you're essentially rebuilding your network as you move to cloud, or at least you have that flexibility to do so, we can set it up properly, where our administrators have their own virtual private cloud. They have a secure gateway to remote into that environment so that that secure gateway can be monitored for maliciousness and any potential violations, maybe by an adversary. Once they're into that management VPC, they have the ability to peer into the production cloud environment. Again, that's another chokehold and gives us another opportunity to do the levels of inspection that are appropriate, but of course, above and beyond to also set the access controls for the administrators themselves. And yes, you heard me say, for administrators. One of the things we spent quite a bit of time discussing throughout our journey in 401 is the idea that the principle of least privilege applies to all, not just end users, but to administrators. And the list of the top 5 things you could do for your information security program, number 4 would be reduce the number of users with administrative privilege. And on its face, the idea that we should reduce administrative privilege, not only does it sound perhaps confrontational or controversial, it doesn't even seem like it's doable, but it is doable. And we have to. It's not about taking power away from the administrators. It's all about taking power away from the adversary once they compromise an administrative account. That's why this 401 update with 60% of new or rewritten content was focused on making sure that it's directly applicable in the face of modern adversary. If we can battle, if we know how they did, if they know how they attack, then we can build a defense that is applicable. And this is just only but one example of one slide. And to make sure that we understand it's not just a discussion of one particular cloud provider, it's a discussion around of examples of other cloud providers, where our final example here is to show that cloud providers recognize and they realize that security is important for us as well. And it's only going to be the case that cloud providers provide more and more security options. But trying to unravel and get to the bottom of the mystery of exactly what's meant by the product offerings? This is an example of a slide where we try to help make a little bit of the heads and the tails as to when Amazon Web Services refers to a product like CloudTrail. What does that mean? And what's the corresponding name for a capable technology in Microsoft's Azure or in Google's cloud? We really want to make you as capable and as successful as is possible. With all that being said, let's start to move towards the end of our presentation by just quickly going through some of the key updates day by day. And this way, for those of you who might have taken 401 before, for any of those who you talk to that have taken 401, this can be an understanding of what's changed relative to today. For day one, that network security day, that establishment of the course theme, the 4 days of what needs to be done to fight a modern adversary, followed by 2 days of how. That is a core structure of the course overall, and of course that starts very heavily in day one. We also, in day one directly, get into that cloud discussion, that cloud module that I alluded to. And some of the examples you just saw come from that very first module on cloud, where we go through the differences in cloud computing by defining exactly what public, private, and hybrid is, and by provider, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. Those are the current big three, and that will always change relative to the time frame, and that's why our content will always stay up to date. Not only that, we also discuss exactly what cloud computing is, whether it's on-prem or it's off-prem, public, private, a hybrid model, what it's meant by infrastructure as a service, platform, SaaS, serverless, or even infrastructure as code. It's a very, very heavy discussion on cloud and that initial module. And then of course, it permeates throughout the rest of the class as already previously discussed. For day two, our defense in depth day, we focused and doubled down on the importance of defense in depth, but made it more applicable to even a modern day adversary yet again, by not including just a traditional understanding of defense in depth, but also bringing newer concepts into play, such as the zero trust methodology. For newer content, we rewrote and rebuilt modules on identity and access management, data loss prevention, and security plans and risk management, again, all focused on both either on-prem and or cloud where it makes appropriate sense to do so. And very specifically, new labs added for day two. For day three, our vulnerability management and incident response day, we rewrote the book, so to speak, on vulnerability assessments. Vulnerabilities are the weaknesses that adversaries leverage to break into an environment. And yet, while many of us would know that to be the truth, for some reason, we sadly ignore vulnerabilities. It's not uncommon for organizations to be unpatched for years, even though they know they have vulnerabilities that need to be patched. And maybe one of the reasons for that is misunderstanding as to how to do vulnerability assessment at scale. So we discussed how to do that. Just like anything in the industry, other aspects of our industry are always evolving. And that's why we also rewrote the book, so to speak, with a focus on penetration testing. And in penetration testing, to understand what the differences are between pen testing, red teaming, and the all new important concept of purple teaming, where red and blue teams, that's offense and defense, work together for the betterment of all, themselves and the organization overall. We also have a newer discussion on how digital forensics play into the importance of incident response. For day four, our data security technologies day, we had a revisit of our cryptographic discussion and a revisit of applying those concepts in the terms of our network security devices that constitute things such as firewalls, intrusion detection, and intrusion prevention systems. In the very final part of that discussion of day four, where we then pivot into days 5 and 6 of the how we do what we were taught to do, is the endpoint security discussion. Because of course, at the end of the day, the adversary ends up on an endpoint. The endpoint is quite often the keys to the kingdom, especially because of the concepts of cloud integration. We tie all those important concepts together to summarize those first 4 days. For day 5, We focused on new developments in patching methodology for Windows and the all new Windows 10 developments that affect the different types of security controls we can apply. We also added new labs to day 5. And then finally, last and not least, our day 6, where our day 6 received a substantial refocusing on not only the concepts of Linux and Unix, but a full discussion of Mac OS, which of course is based on Unix itself. Not to be left last, definitely not least, we also did a refocus and a doubling down on smartphone security. And why smartphone security is a discussion on day 6, one traditionally focused on Linux and Unix? Well, quite simple. The major operating systems that support the major smartphones and similar related technologies are based more on Linux than they are on anything else. So it all in all fits into the overall discussion. And of course, it behooves me to mention one other truth when it comes to smartphones. They're quickly becoming the device of choice when it comes to access for an individual. And whatever can access our environment can also be used against us. I hope that you see that now that we've covered the ideas of what is in the new 401, you can see how it really is architected around a real-world understanding of adversary and to make us as capable as possible. When will this update go live? Maybe that's one of the questions right now. Well, it is already live. It went live July 20th, so it's been out there for about 6-ish weeks right now and is receiving really positive feedback. If you want to take it in live online, of course, that's one of your options. Another option that's always available is the on-demand, where you have 4 months of access to your courseware, the slides, the notes, the material, and that went live on July 28th. If you're interested on seeing the different offerings that are available, the different types, times, the dates, the instructors, or again, if you want more information on the other modalities of self-study or on-demand, there is the link here that's provided on the slide. I know you can't click on it, right? But I do put it there for you and you can take a screenshot of that, of course, or you can just simply go to the SANS website and under the course list, you can find SEC401, which is exactly where that particular link came from. You know what though, there is probably one more thing I think I should mention. I know that we're all going through a lot and I know that we all have our struggles. And I know that on top of that, as we make these quick decisions in the face of something that's unprecedented in recent times, we need more information than ever before. And as the idea of community and giving back, that really is at the heart of not only SANS, but its instructor core. At the end of the day, I care more about the success of our community than anything else. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to become involved with SANS, because they have that exact same passion. So here, what I'd like to show you is that at sans.org/free, F-R-E-E, we have a web page focusing on free cybersecurity resources and programs. And we really double down on this effort of making everyone aware of all the offerings that have actually been free for a long period of time, and all the new offerings that we're also making free so that we can stay fighting the modern adversary in these unprecedented times. As of course, I'm sure the adversary has also doubled down, that as we're making decisions quickly, they're going to try and leverage those decisions against us. So we need to be as capable as possible. And you can see here, we have different podcasts that are available. We have online holiday hack challenges, posters, and newsletters. There are white papers that are being written by the analyst community, as well as the top papers that are graded from the STI, the SANS Technology Institute, the postgraduate arm of SANS that grants things such as a master's degree in information security engineering, as well as certificates. Down below, we have security awareness planning, information on how to create a secure work from home workforce, tips for secure video conferencing, and really awesome as well, many of the capture the flag events that you would normally be able to participate in at a live in-person event are also now being offered online for free. I highly recommend that you check out this webpage because, of course, not only above and beyond all of that, we have all the different tools, tool sets, and capabilities that have been given back to the community by SANS instructors. And maybe, I know I keep saying one more thing, and that's because I get so excited here, and there's always things that bubble to my mind because there's just so much information. It's hard to keep up with, but we have a lot of scholarship programs where if you're transitioning careers, if you're in an underrepresented aspect of the community, there are programs for you where you might be able to get a scholarship to take SANS training for free. I don't exactly know all the ins and outs of those programs, but you can definitely get all the information here from this page. So please take that into consideration and keep that in mind. SANS.org/free is a constantly and continually updated reference to help you get the most of making sort of lemonade out of lemons, so to speak. Or maybe you have more time now in the midst of what we're going through to brush up on areas that you thought you didn't have time before everything locked down. So that being said, just keep that in mind, and it's just another example of what we're trying to do to make everything as relative and as capable as can be for you, the defender. And with that, the ultimate conclusion is pretty simple. New content focused on modern adversary, our technical difficulty level increased, new labs, a new wiki, that's a new one, a new wiki and VMs, all focused on cloud, and cloud. With that, that's me been speaking, I guess, for 45 minutes already. And I think that's more than enough of hearing what's new in 401. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Carol, and then Carol is going to open up for any questions that might have been typed in as we were doing the presentation. And if you have a question and haven't typed it in yet, please feel free to do so. Handing it over to you, Carol.
All right, thank you so much for that great presentation. We do have some questions ready. However, if anyone has additional questions for Brian, as he said, go ahead and put it in the questions window. So our first question is asking if there's a gap of knowledge and they'd like, I would rather dive deep in that subject in SEC/management 5-level SANS training rather than taking the overall course that you're referencing. They're wondering if they're missing something.
Sure, it's a great question. So I'll just repeat the question just to make sure I have it correct. I think the question is asking, if I thought there was a gap in my knowledge, why would I not just take the 500 level, the full course on that particular gap? You're not missing anything with the idea of how you framed your question. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I think the idea here, and I'll answer your question, but specifically focus in a different way. 401, people often identify gaps in knowledge, and that gap in knowledge might be something they would focus on later on. So I think there's two parts to the answer of your question there. The first one is what I just said. 401 might help you to identify your gap, which then you would take with a full training of the course, like a 500 level. But I think the other aspect of your course was, if I took 401, am I relearning too much of what I already know? And I would say there are two ways of looking at that. First, there's nothing wrong with reinforcement. And second, even if there is learning you think that you know, quite often you might be surprised how when it's presented in a different way, it gives you a whole new different perspective of what modern defense is. And you see, again, thank you for asking that question, because for me, it'll help me to understand how to articulate even better to people when they ask questions on 401. It's not just learning about intrusion detection systems, intrusion prevention systems. It's learning how does that apply to the modern adversary. And so we might be familiar with the concepts, but not how it applies directly to a modern adversary. And that's another benefit of 401. So I hope that answers that question. If you have a follow-up, please feel free to ask it as well.
All right, thank you. This next one asks, how is the course being delivered in the evenings or weekends or a combination? They're not sure you've covered that already, but.
Oh, sure. So again, the question is, Brian, how is the class being covered, considering times of day, days of week, and so on? Well, again, there are a couple of ways to answer that. So first and foremost, if we were doing training in person, if we were, then our schedule is 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. on the days of class. And that's where the evening comes into play. It's a boot camp class. Boot camp means that we have additional hours of class instruction. The question was probably more in line with the idea of what options are available during these times right now with the different modalities we offer. For that information, the best place is the SANS website, where if you go and you click on the SEC401 class, it'll show you the different offerings, the different time zones, the different modalities, the different flexibilities. Because sometimes we offer 401, for example, in more of an evening style or an afternoon style. We offer ones that have the flexibility of a 2-week or a 3-week training session. So in other words, more days but less hours per day. And then above and beyond, there's also the flexibility of things like on demand. In on demand, that's at your own pace, but you have the audio of an instructor with the slides and the notes and assessment questions. So I think that probably answers the question, but if not, please feel free to follow up as well.
All right, thank you. This next question I'm going to put in the chat window. If you could expand that, there's a lot of acronyms in there that you might be able
Sure,
to
no problem.
phrase better. Do you see it there?
So the question is for the ideas of infrastructure, or not infrastructure, identity and access management. Will concepts such as OAuth, SAML, ADFS be covered? So we don't necessarily get completely into SAML or OAuth. There is some degree of it. It's not in depth, but it is mentioned. And ADFS is also mentioned because of the integration we have with Windows. So it is covered in the class at a high level. It is.
All right, thank you. Will vulnerable and stringent crypto protocols be covered, plus VPN technologies?
So the question, I guess, are VPNs covered? VPN technologies are covered. And yes, we do discuss the vulnerabilities and weaknesses that come from either the deployment of cryptography or algorithms specifically. We do cover those concepts.
All right, and someone else responded that you did cover their question and said cheers. So that's all I see today. Do you have any closing thoughts you'd like to share?
I'd just like to say thank you to everyone for taking the time to attend this webcast, and I hope you found it valuable. I would be very excited to see you or your colleagues in class. And if you have any questions for me whatsoever, my information is included in the slide deck. It's in the notes. I should have actually put it on the slide, I realize now. But it is in the notes there. So feel free to reach out to me. You know, we're all a community. And if you have questions about registration, then feel free to call into the SANS office or send an email, check out the website, and most of those questions can be easily answered. But thank you very much for taking the time to hear about my passion and what's new with 401.
All right, well, thank you so much, Brian, for your great presentation, which helps bring this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.